All right, thank you for coming. Really cool session coming up just now. We've got Peter Wilson and Davide Eynard. They are going to be talking to you about CQ, Stack Overflow for Agents. I don't know if you've seen contributions to human Stack Overflow. Basically plummeted after ChatGPT came out, which is really sad for all of us. Hopefully these two can do something about it. Give them a round of applause, please. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. So I'm Davide, he's Peter. We're both from Mozilla AI. The first thing I wanted to start with was Mozilla what? Because the first thing usually people tell us is, are you the Firefox guys or are you the browser guys? We don't want AI in the browser and things like that. Or we're very happy to have AI in the browser. This doesn't happen that often though. So I left an exercise for you for after the talk. If you have the Firefox application installed on your laptops, try and connect to mods ://a. This is kind of a fake URI, but the browser folks can do anything they want with it. So you just connect to that URL, and it will open the Mozilla Manifesto, which is a manifesto that has been set up like 20-ish years ago, when the internet was at, let's say, its very beginning, at least from the user perspective. It kind of began even 25 more years earlier. So in the manifesto, you find some principles that are all about the internet, the web, as a resource that was open, that should have remained open, I say should have, and where people should be able to drive the experience they have of the web, where security is important, and where open code and the standards and interoperability are very important. So the next step in the exercise is you apply a regular expression and you substitute the internet with AI and try and see if this makes sense to you. And I did this exercise before applying for Mozilla AI, and I was mind blown at how actual this principle could be, even if you just move the internet to AI. And this is exactly the same exercise that the Mozilla Foundation folks did a few years ago, it's 5-ish years ago, before the big AI boom, when they decided they wanted to fund a startup company to work on AI, not specifically AI in the browser, so something separate from the Mozilla Corporation working on Firefox, but something that was only directed towards promoting open source AI. So it's us, we're not the browser guys, we love the browser guys, we talk to them, we're siblings, we're just focusing on open source AI. So first thing when you talk about open source AI is a comparison I see done very often in terms of user experience. Very often people take open weights models and then try and evaluate them and see how they work for their tasks, and then compare them to commercial AI services. But what often they don't think about is that a commercial AI service is not just an LLM. It's an LLM plus agentic code, plus tools, plus engineering, plus thousands of engineers working on more engineering. And to me, the comparison is a bit unfair and creates a gap between the perception that users have of closed AI services versus open source AI. So our mandate is to try and make this gap smaller, but making open source AI more accessible to users and something where their experience is very similar to the one of commercial services. The first thing we want to work on, or we want to talk about, is context. And here I have two very simple examples. If you are here, you probably all know that context is king and context is important. And it's important both from the bad or negative point of view and from the positive point of view. This is the negative example. We have a tool that's called WASM Agents that allows you to play with agents in your browser, connecting to a local LLM. And one problem we gave it was try and connect to this website, which is the Mozilla AI, I think it was the AnyAgent repository, yes, the AnyAgent project, and tell us how many stars it has. And the first times I tried this tool, I was like, man, I did something wrong because it's just returning me the manual to AnyAgent. What's happening? And what I realized later, at the time I was still using Olama, the default context size was 4K. And my tool was downloading stuff from the web and getting way more tokens that were available in the context that was made available by Olama. So at the time, default choice, 4K, nothing shown because logs were not apparent to the user. Usually great user experience because if you have a very small context size, the LLM is going to work on your system. But the context is cut. The model forgets the question that it's been asked, and it will just take the page and summarize it to you to some extent. So this is the bad example. A good example instead is this one. We were playing with Any Agent, which is another open source tool that we're building, and we were trying to answer simple questions. I very much like naive, super simple examples. This one is about my birthday. I asked Claude what my birthday was, and he said, oh, I don't know this Davide Eynard. I asked GPT-OSS what my name was. It was a bit harsher. It said, Davide Eynard is a nobody. It doesn't appear anywhere. So I cannot really tell his birthday. And then I tried to add a tool, a very simple one, that had two functions. It was browse this directory and open and read the contents of this file. And then I asked the same question to a local small model that kind of tried to open stuff and found a birthdays.csv file, and then opened it, found that there were birthdays of very popular computer scientists. You can see there's Ada Lovelace, Alan Turing, and Charles Babbage, and me. And it answered properly. And the nice thing is, this is a positive example from a model that's 0.8 billion large. And again, you already know this. You inject the proper context, and the thing is going to work better even than a commercial model to some extent. Then, to be completely truthful, the 0.8 billion models took quite some attempts to get this done properly. But still, with very small local models, let's say 4 billions, 9 billions, you will see them. This is not RAG, this is agentic answering to your questions. You will see it trying to open the directory, seal the files, try and get a sense of what's there, see there's something called birthdays, and detect that birthdays is a good file name for something that might contain date words, and automatically open this. So we are living in the context world, and something that we feel we are kind of missing from our contexts is ways to solve issues that the models have not experienced yet. So this is a very frequent use case. You have an LLM, you have or a commercial model too. In this case, it was run with a Claude. You ask it to solve a problem. The model finds an issue. Luckily, it's an agent. It will try and fix the issue, try other solutions. But in some cases, the solution is just not there. It won't be able to find it unless you interrupt it and say, you know, this thing should be done differently. It will do the thing differently, and from then on, continue without any problem. So what if you could save this information and reuse it to some extent? And I think Claude does this already. It has memories, and you might think that Claude probably is everything that you need to solve this task. I'm going to hand this out to Peter, because he had a nice experience with Claude to tell you.
Yeah, I'm very good friends with Claude. Here's an empty slide. Yeah, so like Davide said, folks might say, yeah, but we've got agent.md and Claude.md, we can just add rules and that solves it. Or if you debunk that slightly, then you say, oh, well, we've got memories now as well, so that'll solve it. But I've enjoyed quite a lot of time with Claude. I'll show you in 2 seconds. I'll keep that off the side for now. But I guess the problem with that is that, one, it's stored locally. You end up with everything stored in like a Claude MD file. I mean, you can have your global one and you can have a project one, but all of that stuff then also has to get loaded into the context, which also means that Anthropic and friends get to see what's in your context. So you might not want all that stuff getting sent up there. So yeah, the memories thing I feel like was intended to kind of like improve on the rules. But sometimes, even with memory, Claude seems a little bit forgetful. So I asked it, click, this question, which was saying, basically, can you just go and have a little spy at all these memory files you've been writing and see like if there's basically duplication across them? And Claude was very happy and obliging and told me I was great, and then came back and said, yeah, nothing's the same, basically, because they're not byte identical and they don't have the same file name, so they just must be completely different. And I was like, kind of took me a little bit too literally there, so asked it, with a little bit of steering, maybe just check for the intent. And then Claude went away and did lots of things, and then came back and TLDR basically said, oh yeah, I've been writing the same memory tons of times in different places and also just ignoring it. So a little bit, yeah, I feel like this is a little bit of a therapy session, so I will also share some things that have happened with me and Claude very quickly, which is stuff like this. Claude not following the rules that it's been given and just doing what it wants, sometimes even when you say no to a prompt, doing what it wants. stuff where it remembered things and kept relapsing, and just once when it just told me it was confused. So yeah, it's good times. Anyway, so getting back to the topic, I guess, CQ. The blog post that we put out about this initially was describing it as Stack Overflow for agents. That was a lot to do with me having a very smooth brain, and it seemed like it made sense. And disclaimer for this slide, it doesn't exactly work like this, but it just to try and paint the picture. But the idea being that you've got your agent running away, runs into some errors, does that stuff that Davide showed before, finally figures out this is how you do this thing. And then at that point, what it should do in our ideal world is propose that as what we call a knowledge unit to CQ. So we've got CQ Exchange at the bottom, if anyone can scan that if they want to go and see the kind of hosted version that we're running, but also the open source CQ repo that Mozilla AI has got an open source server component that you can run yourself locally in Docker or whatever. And I'm just checking in case I forget anything, so don't want to forget anything. Yeah, it was just a QR code I wasn't supposed to forget. Okay, cool. So what's a knowledge unit? Spoiler alert, we don't save them in YAML, we just put them in JSON, but it looks prettier maybe in YAML on a slide. So the idea being that we have this schema for a knowledge unit, that the agent's got a skill. We'll explain this in a second how it works, but this is basically what gets saved when it's run into a problem, like what the domains were that it thought it was working in, what the kind of insight was, so what summary it's got, what action it had to take, and then it gets like some metadata stuff it can save around the languages it was using, the frameworks. It can save a little pattern, I think, if it wants as well. Yeah. And then this is kind of how it works on the right-hand side. Hits the problem, figures out how to fix it, summarizes that stuff, submits it to CQ when you're running in a remote mode. That gets approved by a human-in-the-loop review, which I'll cover in a second. And then once that's been proposed and exists in the server and has been reviewed, then any other agent like on the planet that's talking to our hosted CQ can get that via a query. So the idea being that the skill itself will say, before you start working on a new task, you should go and query CQ for that domain and see if there's something that might give you a hand. So you kind of get like very targeted, specific bits of information rather than having to either load everything in up front or figure it out or whatever. Yeah, okay, cool, I'm still talking. I'm going to hand it back to Davide at some point just to keep it exciting. So yeah, so CQ, the skill is basically like there's a skill which you can install as a plugin, and then that runs an MCP server, because you've got to have an MCP server to be cool. And then the MCP server basically lets you do this. So you can query to see what CQ's already got. Bless you. You can propose things once you find a non-obvious problem that would save another agent time. Once you get something from querying, the guidance and the skills like you validate this thing first, don't just blindly use it. But anyway, once it's checked and then it tries something out and says, actually, that did work, it should confirm it. So you kind of build up this confidence scoring over time. And similarly, if there's something wrong, like it's stale guidance or it's completely wrong, it can flag that thing as well. There's also a kind of human triggerable part of the skill in the plugin, which is that you, at the end of a session, if you feel like it missed some stuff, you can ask it to like reflect over the whole session and kind of show you what it thinks might be like summarizable knowledge units, and then you can like approve them and edit them and stuff. Yeah, and so how it works, I guess, initially is this on the left is when you install the CQ plugin. By default, you just kind of you get like a little SQLite database locally, so nothing goes anywhere as the default installation. So anyone can just start using it on your own machine, and that also means that anything it creates and proposes is saved there. There's no like review process in this stage, so any other agents who are running on that machine automatically just see that stuff straight away. You can then configure it to connect to a remote tier. So as mentioned before, we've got an OSS server component of the CQ repo, and that kind of allows you to almost have like a team level thing. So you can add some users with username and passwords, and then everyone can propose them. At that point, you have to go through a review process, which I joked yesterday looks a little bit like Tinder. I think I've got a screenshot to show you. But and then also that there's a public commons, which is CQ Exchange for us, which is like Mozilla, I'm going to say curated, but that that kind of vibe where when this thing's fully up and running, the idea is that you can propose things up through the chain. And so if you've got, even within your like private namespace on CQ Exchange, you could say, actually, this is something that applies to everyone, and I want to nominate that to be graduated up to the commons. And that's kind of like that Stack Overflow view of like, once it's there, then it's something that everyone can see. Yeah, okay, but but risks. So yeah, we've got to be honest about a lot of this stuff. Said Stack Overflow a few times, and with that comes a bit of like, oh, this feels a little bit like a social network in some ways. There's a lot of potential things that could go wrong with this, and we know about them. We did talk with a security expert. We've got like an OWASP stride internally. We've got this document we've tried to look at to ways to mitigate these things, but we can't completely get rid of everything. So yeah, sorry, it says on there, it's like a social media platform. So basically, you've got a variety of things that could potentially go wrong with this. So the actual KU could contain something that could make it do something bad, or sad times for enterprises, maybe there's personal data or something like that in. The skill itself, again, there's some things on the front, like front-loaded on the skill, which are supposed to mean that we've got like a vibe check that we've built into it now. We worked alongside someone for that. Which is intended to sort of like go through a series of checks to try and filter out anything ending up in there. And the protocol always, as I mentioned earlier, that it should always validate KUs before it tries to actually do what it tells it to do. Obviously, that's front-loaded stuff, but there's still potential for other things when you look at the server side. And the server side is obviously prone to things like DDoS and identity spoofing and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So yeah, we're saying this. You kind of have the same assumptions that govern the open internet, that this is a free commons for everyone, but we have to be careful with that. I'll stop talking in a second, I promise. Wrap it up, Peter. We'll try giving out the time. Yeah, so some of the stuff, we've got this idea of mitigation, as we mentioned before, and some of the kind of the defense in depth, as you might consider it. So like what ways could we go about trying to improve this? So with the Exchange platform we build in, like some of the roadmap stuff I talked at the end about was like we could use cryptographic signing maybe. So you've got an API key. So I guess very, very quickly, when you sign into CQ Exchange or even the open source one, you get like a JWT token for yourself. But then you can then create short-lived API keys, which you give to your agent. So that you're like delegating permission to the agent to act on your behalf. And then so that's like one step. But then, so you can't do control plane operations with an API key. And then also the idea being that like that verifies like who that person was or what that was acting on behalf of. But then we could do signing of the actual knowledge unit. You could potentially upload your public key into the CQ Exchange and sort of opt into that sort of stuff. And we can then make sure that it came from your computer as well. So there's like a layered mitigation there. There's the idea of like layered guardrails or guardrails pipeline, where we kind of pass through a lot of stuff as it comes through. So you could check for PII, you can check for stuff out. We could run sandboxes for things. And the human in the loop review stuff is something that we talked about internally as well. Like at some point, maybe we need to be able to get away from that to like human on the loop to be able to scale it much more. But for now, we're very keen on making sure we do this right. So we're doing human in the loop reviews for things before they become available to other people. And it's the same when you play with this yourself in the server. Oh, here we go. There's some screenshots. So there's the Tindery one that you can swipe left and right with. That's on the open source one. And the CQ Exchange one that we just released last week looks a little bit more sensible, but that's that. And then I think I can give it back to Davide. Thank you. Sorry, thank you for your time.
So first of all, I need to say we didn't fix it for everyone or forever. We fixed it for a very specific use case that was a very personal one. I wanted to run the Joplin MCP. So Joplin is an open source note-taking tool, which I've been using since, 15 years ago or something like that. So it has plenty of nodes. And I want to have my own, let's say, LLM wiki-like experience. I wanted it to make it accessible to Claude. So I just asked Claude, how can I add a new MCP server? I know the configuration, I know all the keys I have to add. How should I do that? It gave me some instructions, I followed them, and this was beginning of April, so you will find some things which might not be super up-to-date with the latest version of CQ, but they're definitely reflecting the behavior of Claude. So Claude tried to install, and he told me everything is fine. You have your MCP server set up. Then I started Claude again, and I couldn't find it. So I asked, what's the problem? And he said, let me look into that. And it continued for a while, trying to find more possible causes. And eventually, after quite some time and tokens, I decided to give it a suggestion, like, why don't you look for the up-to-date documentation on your own website? And this is what Claude did. It went and checked it out and eventually found a solution that was like the configuration file has to be in another path, and fixed it. And eventually told me, okay, now the problem is fixed. So what I did with CQ after that was to explicitly say, do CQ reflect. So reflect on what happened, go through your trace, and find how you fix the issue. And then it created its own knowledge unit. We proposed it to the system and saved it. In that case, it was still just a local, this is why I say we didn't fix it for everyone yet, because it was on the local setup that we had. And once fixed, I could just restart Claude. The MCP was there already. I just removed everything and restarted the process from scratch, just to show that I could try again, and then Claude Code automatically looked for relevant information in CQ. It found the solution to the problem, so it immediately decided to use the proper configuration file. So think about this. I solved it for myself. Whenever I run the agent again, not just with Joplin, but with other MCPs, the configuration is going to be the good one, and I save time and tokens on that. What if now I can share it with my team? Or what if I can share it with everyone else? Like, what is the value that we add to the whole community of people developing with the AI-powered tools? And do we want these tools to be in the hands of just one single corporation, or do we want these tools to be in the hand of many people? Potentially your own corporation or your own team, if you want to be safe and just share the internal knowledge you have, but possibly also with as a more general commons open to everyone else. So what we learned.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been fun for a couple of months now. We're in the beginning of June today. Yeah, so this kind of started, we talked about it late February and then started trying to build this thing throughout April and May. We learned a lot of things, I think, and the interesting stuff, I guess, here summarised. So skill offerings, Tesla vibes. It's a big fight for attention. So we found a lot of the issues early on, trying to get the skill trigger at the right time, because we didn't look into like using hooks specifically, and just seeing if we could get the LLM and the agent to know when it should do something, rather than before every single call, for example, because it's more like when a task starts, not before every call or whatever. So that was interesting, and how you kind of do versioning and all that stuff. That kind of interesting. It was why we're here. Yes, that was one thing we found. The privacy for us, privacy first, was like the right default. So we've been talking a lot internally again about how we could do things like Web of Trust, and how you could sort of like open this thing up and use like just rely on the protocol itself to do a lot of stuff for you. Obviously, one of the Mozilla AI and Mozilla like principal things around choice, around privacy, around the rest of it. So it's like, how do we kind of make things more opt-in? So from default, you can't see who else created a specific KU unless they opt into something, all that sort of stuff. But the lesson we learned around that was it kind of sometimes makes things a bit slower to get there, because you're always having to kind of keep that in your mind when you're saying, we can build it this way, we can do that. Or we build it this way that'll enable us to get there later. So it's like trying to dodge a lot of things. The CQ thing compounds, so even if you use it offline, we found that the more things it finds, it actually becomes quite useful. I've done some, I was going to say podcast, no, live stream? Anyway, podcasty live stream things recently. We did a demo, and the kind of initial demo for this thing was trying to get it to write some GitHub actions, and it always used to use versions of like two major versions out of date, which on its own might not be terrifying, but ideally you'd want it to be accurate. And that sort of thing, you find that it didn't matter how many times, if you didn't save stuff with CQ, it would have still kept doing it, because it just goes off its training data and sort of like full Dunning-Kruger's it and claims it knows everything. And then this controversial thing at the end, the platform before protocol thing, it was more of like a mindset thing, I guess. So it was like, as Mozilla, like Davide said, we want to make sure that we're trying to put something out there in the public domain. We want to like have protocols, have schemas, like try and help steer that stuff. But actually, it's sometimes the other way around. Maybe you need to have a platform first to be dog fooding stuff to see what's like should be in a schema, what doesn't need to go in there yet, what kind of you might want to leave out. Maybe people might want to customize their own things. So we want to get to protocols of our platforms, but we're just trying to make sure that we feel like we're doing it right. I really need to wrap this up. And so I think the last thing maybe from me is I think that maybe if CQ isn't for you, don't worry. If it is, that's awesome. It feels like there's a lot of similar conversations we're having with people. There's a lot of other people in this space as well. So if we've got it wrong, a lot of people have got it wrong, which is slightly reassuring. So yeah, quickly roadmap. Sorry, that was the other thing. What was next? So from a platform perspective, on our CQ Exchange, we want to build a kind of tenancy stuff for names, org namespaces. So it's not just individual contributor stuff; it's all private. Working on the nomination, graduation pipeline, so you can graduate stuff from org namespace to commons. The guardrails pipelines I mentioned before, the signing stuff I mentioned before, being able to export your KUs, so obviously it's an open schema, so we want to be able to take that stuff out and take it anywhere you want. That's like a crossover to the protocol one. And then on the protocol side, how we look at things like federation between other CQ servers, so if anyone else wanted to run their own server. We've talked to some folks in the space who kind of were interested in like a working group around that sort of thing. So there's a lot of stuff coming to watch this space. And then that'll be me.
Thank you. So this is our usual ending slide. And for that, I recycled this image that comes from a 2006 publication. It's a 20 years old image. I was doing work on participative systems, and CQ is going to be participative. Stack Overflow was. And there was this power law of participation that I read about 20-something years ago. And it shows how, like, which different type of engagements or participation you can have with a platform that starts from the lowest effort ones until the highest effort ones, and also the ones that reward you the more because you contributed the most to a given process. So the links that we provide here are kind of following the same power law. So you can just check out our Mozilla organization on GitHub. There's plenty of projects. There is something we call the choice first stack for agentic AI development that starts from agentic frameworks, goes to LLM routing, goes to LLM serving or local model serving, and adding guardrails and running encoders, everything like that. So you will find an open source package for almost everything that you can do here. Or try CQ Exchange. This is super low effort. You just try the website and see how it works for you. You can clone the repo and try and play with the actual code locally and see how that works for you too. And after you have seen how these things work for you, open issues, we super appreciate harsh comments. We want to improve. We want to make this thing something that people actually use. And to my desire, if other people want to contribute or want to fork and have another project which is as open as what we want to build ours, I just want an open project to win over here and have these kind of knowledge units being shared across people and not just owned by a single company. Submit PRs, of course, if you want to collaborate with our code instead of forking. And yeah, contribute new KUs. That's also, well, probably not the highest effort thing, but maybe it's something that you need to put some effort in before you create them and you test the system on your own. So I think that is really all for this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you both so much. That was really interesting and like touching on problems we're talking about every day as well. We have exactly 2 minutes for questions. Oh. Does anyone have a question they want to ask quickly? Yes.
Hello there.
Hello.
How does it work when you have, like, you're in a big organization, you have multiple repositories and different domains, and if you're going to do DDD, you'd say bounded context or something like this. Like I saw in the examples, it said like front end and things like this. How does the retrieval work and all this sort of stuff? And does it like leak incorrect information and actually confuse the agent?
So, yeah, I can try to answer this. So yeah, it's the skill drives basically like a ton of this stuff in terms of like it asks the agent to summarize things, it asks the agent to figure out what domains and stuff. It also tells it like to try and generalize things and not to make them specific to like I say, like a specific project that it's working on, unless that project is like an open source tool, for example, and then in which case it would be allowed to. So the domains, it's the way that it works. I don't know if you saw the YAML-y thing before, like, because it was up and down. But you kind of like the domains are almost like that, kind of like it's trying to generalize, so it can have as many domains as, well, I think say as many as. You can set a list of domains in. Oh, thanks, Davide.
No
Whizzing back to my YAML. Yeah, but you also got like languages, frameworks. There's a pattern thing you can use as like a bespoke string as well. So like the agent should be told via the skill like a good way to try and use that. In terms of like what stops it from doing stuff, like once things are submitted to like upstream to a remote, I guess at that point it sort of becomes more of like the guardrail stuff, and then a human in the loop review to say whether something is or isn't allowed into like a commons or whatever. But yeah,
to add on this, as you clarified, it is very much a retrieval problem, right? So we have a first implementation. We also hope we will make this better in time. So I think there's a lot of effort that can be put here into making things better and better. And the more the knowledge base grows, the more we want to have something that works efficiently.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say actually stuff on that in the open source repo you'll be able to see exactly how the server and SDK and stuff work around how it kind of gets those results and scores them and then sends back like the order by relevance. There's a PR one of our colleagues has opened on the open source repo to bring in semantic search and stuff, so exactly that, building off that.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks,
really
everyone.
appreciate that. Thank you all for coming. In exactly 10 minutes, we will have our last session before lunch, everyone's favorite time slot. So please come back for that. And you can find these guys out and about today, I hope.
Yeah.
So you can ask them all the questions you like about CQ. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.